In this video, I'm going to answer the question, what type of tenants should you put into your HMO property? So my name is Simon Zutshi. I've been investing in property for 25 years. I'm the founder of the Property Investors Network, which is the largest network of property investors in the UK. And I'm the author of Property Magic, the Amazon #1 property bestseller. Now, one of my favorite strategies is HMOs, houses of multiple occupation, where you're renting out individual rooms to individual people. Each person has their own contract, and it can be very profitable. Normally they pay you one amount per month that covers the rent and the bills, so you as the landlord pays the bills. Now, there are different types of tenants, and depending on the location of the property and the type of property, you might have different types of tenants. So I thought it's really useful if I share the 4 main groups of tenants in HMO properties. I'll explain a little bit about each of them and what you need to do, and hopefully you can identify what are the ideal tenants to put into your HMO property. So the first group of tenants for HMOs are students. And sometimes when property investors think about HMOs, they think that all HMOs are for students. That's not correct. So when people go to university, they often go to a hall of residence or university flat for their first year. And then in their second, third, fourth year, they move out to a student house. Now, one thing to say, in many areas, there is an oversupply of student properties. And the reason is because they built these new purpose-built blocks, which are nice and shiny, and students like to live in those. So there is an oversupply in many areas. But generally it's the properties that are either not such good condition or they're slightly further away from the university. Those are the ones that remain empty. So if you're thinking about putting students into your property, it's very important that you're very close to the university, and also you have a very high standard of accommodation. When I was a student back in the early 90s, I lived in some houses that were really not very good. And that was very much the average standard at that time. Standards are very, very high for students. And sometimes you might get the parents who are dropping the kids off at university, come and look around the house, and they're almost checking it out if it's good enough for little Johnny or little Sarah, their little precious darlings, to live in this property. So it's got to be very, very high standard. Now, a couple of things you need to understand about students is you've got to make sure you get the academic year correct. So students will typically look for where they're going to live in their second, third, fourth year. They'll do it in the second term of their first year at university. So they arrive kind of end of September, beginning of October, and after Christmas, when they come back the beginning of second term, they've decided who they're going to live with. They walk around with their group of friends looking for properties to rent. So you need to make sure if you're renting to students, your property is available in January, even though they're not actually going to move in probably to July, August, or even September of that year. A lot of people make a mistake in that they get a property ready. They say, well, I have it ready for August, September when the students start. Most of the students have already found where they're living by then. There will always be some students looking in September for places because maybe they're a bit late coming to university. Maybe they've fallen out with their friends. They don't want to live with them anymore. So you will always find some students at that time of year, but most student tenancies have already been set up beforehand. Now, the other thing about students, if they're booking early, January, February, they tend to come as a group. And unlike most other HMOs, you often get them onto one contract where they're all jointly liable and several for that rent. What it means is if one tenant, one of the students falls out of university, they fail their exams, whatever, the other students either have to pay that person's rent, or what actually happens, they normally find another friend to come and live with them in their house to cover the rent. So that's a real benefit. The other thing about students is if they're full-time students, they are exempt from council tax. You normally pay that as a landlord in an HMO. They don't have to pay as long as they apply to the local council and prove they're full-time students. And the final thing about students is very often, because they come as a group, very often they will pay the bills themselves. So you don't have to pay the bills, which normally in an HMO you would do. So this is one of the real benefits. And when you're looking at, should I rent to students or one of the other groups, you've got to understand, well, am I looking and comparing all the true like with like? Because you generally don't pay the bills. If you want to learn more about students, and particularly university and the numbers of students they have and which are the best areas, and et cetera, all universities will have an accommodation office. you can contact them. Very often you can actually advertise that property at the accommodation office as well. So that's the first type of tenant, and many people think, right, that's it. There are some other types of tenants as well. So the second type of tenant is what we call a young professional. This is someone that might be mid-20s, early 30s. They've been to university, they've got a career, they've got a vocation. Maybe they're a doctor, they're a solicitor, they're an accountant, they're an engineer, they're a nurse, they're a teacher. They've got a qualification and a vocation. And what that means is they've probably been to university. Now, that's not saying they're better than people who haven't been to university, just that because they've been to university, they've probably lived in a shared house before, and presumably they liked it, so they don't mind living in a shared house once they finish university. Often, as I said, student university accommodation is very, very high, so it's just as good standard. And if someone's moving to a new city for a new job, they may not know anyone, and moving into an HMO is a great way to get an instant social life. They can connect with some people straight away, and they've got people to go down the pub with, etc. And it's far cheaper and more cost effective living in an HMO, a shared house, than it is living on their own, where they'd not only pay the rent, but they'd also pay all the bills as well. So that's the second type of tenant, which is a young professional. The third type of tenant is very similar to a young professional. They've got a job, they're working, they might be in a factory, a shop, an office, whatever, but they haven't necessarily been to university. Now, nothing wrong with that at all. What it means is they haven't necessarily lived in a shared house before. Maybe they've been living at home with mum and dad, and they don't want to live with mum and dad anymore, or maybe mum and dad don't want them to live there anymore. So they kind of go out, and rather than going to their own flat, which is more expensive, they go into a shared house. Now, by the way, you can mix young professionals and working people together as tenants. That's perfectly fine, but you wouldn't want to mix students with them, and you wouldn't want to mix them with the fourth group of tenants. And the fourth group of tenants is people who are on benefits, people who are receiving local housing authority benefit. They're often single, they're on their own, they just want a room in a shared house. They can be more work. Sometimes people on benefits have a few challenges. Sometimes they're not so good with their money. I am generalizing here. Obviously, by the way, I've got some fantastic tenants who are long-term tenants in some of my single-lets who are on benefits. I couldn't be happy with them. So I've got no problem with people being on benefits. But just to say, imagine you've got a house full of people who are around all day. Sometimes they aggravate each other. It is a lot more work and hassle managing a property with tenants who are on LHA benefits. Sometimes the benefits get cancelled. You've got a lot of work to help them to get those benefits coming through again. If you want to help those kind of people, what many of my students do is they'll take their property, they'll rent it to a charity who specializes in providing accommodation to people who are on benefits. And it's great, many of my students do this. You get to help people who are on benefits who may not otherwise be able to find accommodation. The charity will do a rent to rent with you, so they'll give you a guaranteed rent, often at the full market, and they'll cover all the bills as well. So sometimes you can make more money by renting your property to a charity in this way than you could actually managing it yourself. By the way, I don't manage my HMOs, I have other people do it for me. It is a bit more work than a single let property, but actually you make so much more money, you can afford to pay someone else to do it. And that's why I spend my time doing this, training, teaching, and mentoring, because that's what I love to do. And for me, that's what property investing is all about. It's not so much about having the property, it's about the income you can get from it to replace your job or your business, which means you then have the freedom and choice to spend your time doing whatever you want to do. So those are the 4 different types of tenants you get into HMOs. The type of tenant you put in really depends on the location. Remember, students have to be very close to university. Young professionals, they want great transport links, local facilities and amenities, as do working people. If the people on benefits, they're not so fussy because they don't often have a choice, so location's not so important for them. One of the key things about HMOs, one of the biggest mistakes people make is, you've got to make sure your HMO is better than the average on the market. There is an oversupply in many areas, but it's an oversupply of very average stock. If you have a really good HMO, you should easily be able to attract tenants to that property and minimize your void periods. So you have students, you have young professionals, you have working people, and LHA. Those are the 4 main types of tenants in your property. Remember the tip about don't mix your tenant types. You want to decide based on the location, based on the facilities and amenities, who is it best to target to get into this property as a potential tenant. That's how you decide what type of tenants you put into your HMO. I do hope that's been really useful. If you've liked this information, if you've got a question, please write a question below. I'd love it if you could give a thumbs up and like the video. That means more people will see it. Also, why not subscribe to the channel? I put out at least one video every single week of brand new content to help you be a more successful investor, completely free information. I've been investing a long time, so I kind of helped a lot of people just like you to become successful investors. So why not subscribe to the channel and click the little bell icon? That means you're going to get notified anytime a brand new video comes up. So as always, I'd encourage you to invest with knowledge, invest with skill. I'll see you on the next video. I do hope you've enjoyed watching this video. And look, if you want to learn more about houses of multiple occupation and how you can really profit using them, I've got some extra online training that I'd like to give you access to. So all you have to do is click in the link in the description below the video and you can come and register and get access to that training, which will give you far more detail and really help you save a lot of time and make some real shortcuts to make sure you're getting the next HMO property much, much quicker. So click on the link right now and come and register for that extra bonus training with me. In the meantime, I've also lined up another video here I think you'll find really useful. So until the next video, remember to invest with knowledge, invest with skill.